Hello, welcome to the book report. Yet another economics book, Good Economics for Hard Times by Abhijit V. Banerjee and Esther Duflo, I think. Esther Duflo, yes. Sorry, Banerjee. Uh, Abhijit V. Banerjee, I think. Anyway, I forget how I stumbled onto this book, but I'm glad I did. A lot of really good stuff in here. They are the kind of thinkers I like, very nuanced, no absolute statements, um, you know, not fact based. They're real scientists and very careful with their words and language, and as precise as they can be, and I think bode well for the future of economics and the social sciences in general. I hope the fact-based movement continues to gain steam and become dominant. It needs to be. Bad economics has caused a lot of pain and suffering for no reason, and I'm sick of it. Anyway, these two have written a great book. It's relatively recent, 2019. It came out, so they've got a lot of more recent research, and they're benefiting from that movement towards fact-based economics. I can't believe that that's a movement. But ideology-based economics have done a lot of damage, and we need to figure out what actually works and what doesn't work. Okay, so a lot of notes on this book. I'm going to skip most of them, but a few things were worth reading out loud. Um, so, a better conversation must start by acknowledging the deep human desire for dignity and human contact, and to treat it not as a distraction, but as a better way to understand each other and to set ourselves free from what appear to be intractable oppositions. Restoring human dignity to its central place, we argue in this book, sets off a profound rethinking of economic priorities and the ways in which societies care for their members, particularly when they are in need. That said, well, that's the core. You know what? Let me read this other part too, because this kind of puts that in context. Uh, it is a distorting lens. The focus on income alone is not just a convenient shortcut. It is a distorting lens that often has led the smartest economists down the wrong path, policymakers to the wrong decisions, and all too many of us to the wrong obsessions. It is what persuades so many of us that the whole world is waiting at the door to take our well-paying jobs. It is what has led to a single-minded focus on restoring the Western nations to some glorious past of fast economic growth. It is what makes us simultaneously deeply suspicious of those who don't have money and terrified to find ourselves in their shoes. It is also what makes the trade-off between the growth of the economy and the survival of the planet seem so stark. Anyway, I read that as a plea to focus on results and outcomes rather than traditional economic markers like GDP and income, because what matters is lived lives, actual lives that humans live, and the quality of those lives, not the numbers that represent their income or their per capita GDP in their country. In fact, another good section that I really wanted to read. Here we go. So, a higher GDP may be one way in which this can be given to the poor, but it is only one of the ways, and there's no presumption that it has always been the best one. In fact, the quality of life varies enormously between middle-income countries. For example, Sri Lanka has more or less the same GDP per capita as Guatemala, but maternal, infant, and child mortality are much lower in Sri Lanka and are comparable with those in the United States. So income and per capita GDP are not good measures of lived experience, which is what really counts. And with good social policies and good social safety nets and cultural focus, artistic focus. I mean, there's so many levels, right? But you put it all together, and you can have really a country full of people with lives worth living high quality lives with the exact same GDP as another country where people are miserable and most people are not living lives worth living. So just having the ability to consume does not necessarily equate to a high quality life. In fact, I would be really curious how these authors would react to donut economics and some of the thinking around that to change how economics even measures and what economics even focuses on, right? I think it's long overdue, a change like that. So let's see here. Oh yeah. This was interesting. That when you actually look at the facts, and I had read this before, but when you actually look at the facts, it's interesting. The extreme right wing in the United States is often like, oh, low-income immigration is bad for low-income wages, but skilled immigration, oh yeah, bring it on. Well, the actual evidence, when you actually look at the facts, lower wage immigration actually has little to no effect on wages, and in fact can stimulate economies in certain areas because everybody needs to eat, everybody needs basic services, everybody needs a place to live, and actually there's the evidence is that skilled wages, people who come in, if you let in a lot of people with high skill wages, that will actually have a wage effect among other high skill wages. Obviously, the pain isn't nearly as much, so it's not as big a deal as if low income or low skill immigration affects low skill workers. If it did, but the evidence shows that it does not. So anyway. Let's see here. Yeah, I mean, if you're an economics geek, this book really is worth reading. There's a lot of really interesting stuff in here, but I'm not going to get into it now. Growth mystery. I thought that I had not heard that before. So about 10 years ago, some of the world's top economists and related experts spent over $4 million, a lot of workshops, a lot of time and effort, and could not find any commonalities between periods of high growth in different times and places. So as far as we know, there's no magic bullet for creating rapid growth or rapid increase in wealth in a particular place. There's no single magic thing or a group of things. Like quality of life is more important than GDP. They come back to that theme quite often. Let's see, 97. Oh, here we go. So here was another one I wanted to read. So the overarching takeaway is that we need to address the pain that goes with the need to change, to move, to lose one's understanding of what is a good life and a good job. Economists and policymakers were blindsided by the hostile reaction to free trade, even though they have long known that as a class, workers were likely to suffer from trade in rich countries and benefit from it in poor countries. The reason is that they have taken it for granted that workers will be able to move jobs or places or both, and if they were not able to do this, it was somehow their failing. This belief has colored social policy and set up the conflict between the, quote, losers, close quote, and the rest that we are experiencing today. So that was another good piece of social science that they really emphasized in this book, is that a lot of economists just assume that people will move on a whim, move thousands of miles away from friends and family, from the place they grew up, just to get a decent paying job, and when their total quality of life might actually even be the same, right? So if it seems like you're doubling your income, but your rent is double, and everything else is more expensive, and you're really living pretty much the same life as when you were before. So anyway, the evidence shows that most people, well, not most, but a large numbers of people will not move and don't move, and have a hard time retraining, particularly middle and older aged workers. And so when economic policies such as free trade remove jobs that people have relied on, you can't just assume people will move. You need programs that will allow people to live lives of dignity and transition in place. Which gets me to the last one I wanted to read. Yes, starting from respect. So what is common among a drought-affected farmer in India, a youth in Chicago's South Side, and a 50-something white man who was just laid off? While they may have problems, they are not the problem. They are entitled to be seen for who they are and to not be defined by the difficulties besieging them. Time and again, we have seen in our travels in developing countries that hope is the fuel that makes people go. Defining people by their problems is turning circumstance into essence. It denies hope. A natural response is then to wrap oneself into this identity with treacherous consequences for society at large. The goal of social policy in these times of change and anxiety is to help people absorb the shocks that affect them without allowing those shocks to affect their sense of themselves. Unfortunately, this is not the system we have inherited. Our social protection still has its Victorian overlay, and all too many politicians do not try to hide their contempt for the poor and disadvantaged. Even with a shift in attitude, social protection will require a profound rethinking and an injection of lots of imagination. We have given some clues in this chapter on how to get there, but we clearly don't have all the solutions, and suspect nobody else does either. We have much more to learn, but as long as we understand what the goal is, we can win. Anyway, I really wanted to read those two paragraphs for several reasons. One, they're humble, fact-based, and realize that, coming up with solutions is a process, and it's a learning process and a series of feedback loops. But most importantly, it's that time and again, we can't turn circumstances into who a person is. People should never be defined by their circumstances, and I think this idea that the poor deserve to be poor is insane, psychotic, frankly, and counterproductive, and just false. And so we move forward with love and compassion, and treat all our brothers and sisters with the respect that they deserve, as equal human beings with different backgrounds and different different circumstances, but that when somebody's out down on their luck, born into a poor family and a poor community, that it does not define who they are, and it doesn't mean that they deserve those circumstances. So anyway, a lot of good stuff in here. Highly recommended for anybody who cares about making the world a better place, and lifting up all folks, the poor everywhere, even in high-income countries, middle-income countries, and of course the poor countries, and making the world a more just and wealthy place where everybody has opportunities and everybody has dignity and respect. Okay, happy reading. See you at the next book report.